great pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Maricarmen Guerra. She's an assistant professor at the Civil Engineering Department at Universidad de Concepción in Chile. And her research lies on the dynamics of coastal and fluvial systems through field observations and numerical modeling, the focus on understanding currents, turbulence, waves, and their interaction in high energy environments. So with over a decade of experience, Dr. Jere has led and contributed to research and development projects in marine energy, coastal and riverine flooding, and more recently in oceanographic forecasting. So she's done a little bit of everything. She holds a civil engineering degree and a master's in hydraulic engineering from Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile, and a Ph.D. in civil engineering, environmental engineering from the University of Washington in Seattle. And so takeaway, she'll be talking to us today with her talk titled Waves and Wakes in High Flow Tidal Channels. So please welcome Dr. Maricarmen Guerra.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you all for coming today, and thank you for inviting me, Hannah and Adriana, to give this talk today. So I'm going to talk about high flow tidal channels, and I'm going to talk a little bit about wakes and also about waves. So I'm going to try to do like an overview of different projects that I've been working on the past few years, and also show you a little bit about the projects that we have ongoing in Chile. So it's going to be maybe too much, but I hope you enjoy it. So I thought I will talk about myself first. My name is Maricarmen. I am a professor at a civil engineering department in Universidad de Concepción in Chile. So Chile is in South America. It's a very long country, and Concepción is right there where it says Bay of region. And it's a really very important region for Chile. There is a lot of industry there, and there is also like a very big river mouth called the Bay, and then we have that really nice Gulf area, and we have many ports. So it's very like attractive for doing like coastal engineering or ocean engineering stuff. I am interested in high flow environments because I had a prior interest in tidal energy. But I also have done a lot of work on ocean and fluvial floods, and also use field measurements and modeling. And currently, I'm trying to move more into applied projects and just trying to solve and trying to like integrate myself into the Bay region community. So we are doing a lot of ocean forecasting for the region, wave measurements, which are non-existent in the area, and also a lot of flood work. So I move like in the interface between the ocean and the fluvial systems. So today, I'm going to talk about my work on high flow tidal channels. So these channels are present in a number of places. Near here, the Bay of Fundy is one big example, one of those. In South America, or specifically in Chile, there are two big tidal channels. One is called the Chacao Channel, which is over there, and also the Strait of Magellan, which is a connection between the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, just in the southern tip of Chile. These tidal channels are typically characterized by large tidal ranges, bidirectional currents, very high turbulence intensities, and they are very important connections for navigation, for ecology and mammal migration, and also a few years ago, tidal energy development, which hasn't happened, but it was very important for us at the moment and at the time. So I'm just going to give an overview of high flow tidal channels just to set it up. So these are very high Reynolds number channels. They're very turbulent, and the places where I have done my research have very strong currents, so maybe like even like to 4 meters per second currents, like 10% turbulence intensity, 10 to the minus 3 watts per kilogram dissipation rates, etc. So they are governed by tide. So the mean flow is very deterministic. We can predict very easily with harmonic analysis. And then turbulence fluctuations are really strong. They're very important for transport, for mixing, but also for infrastructure design. So for example, in Chacao Channel, in Chile, they are putting a bridge pier in the middle of the channel with 4 meters per second tidal currents and very strong fluctuations. So that's a big challenge. Actually, it's taken like more than 10 years to build that stuff. It's still not ready yet. it will be ready eventually. Anyways, these are some time series of tidal flow, so very harmonic mean flow, but then in purple you have the turbulent fluctuations, which is something that I studied during my PhD, and I have done many experiments on that. So this is just an example again of the mean flow in a high flow tidal channel. So they are all very similar. So they are typically forced by tides on the ends of each channel. So for example, this is Chacal Channel area in the south of Chile. There is a big island there, and there is like a narrow passage up there. And then the tidal waves come into here, and they get amplified because of tidal resonance. And then you get like a huge tidal amplitude here and a small tidal amplitude here. And then there is also a phase difference, so that drives very strong currents along this narrow passage. And that's basically how all tidal channels work. Like the Bay of Fundy is very similar, Strait of Magellan is very similar. So that's nice because the Puget Sound also is very similar. But my work has been always in trying to measure turbulence at these sites. They are very strong currents, so it's not that easy to put instruments underwater in like 4 meter per second currents, but driven by tidal energy development, they needed that so they could design turbine blades and estimate forces or these non-deterministic but very fluctuating forces that will act on tidal turbines and they might break them. So my work has been, a lot of my past work was trying to measure turbulence at these different sites and see if they behave similarly and how different they are. And what we found is that basically all of these tidal channels were very similar. Turbulence intensity is very much driven by mean flow velocity and bottom generated turbulence. So higher currents show typically higher turbulence intensities. These are some examples of TK spectra from different sites. Developing or using like newer instruments, we were able to capture the typical F to the minus 5/3 turbulence slope at different places. So we have examples in Chacal Channel, similar examples in Admiralty Inlet in Washington State, in Puget Sound, and lately we just finished some measurements in the Strait of Magellan, and we have also learned that behaves really similarly, so we can kind of have an idea of the turbulence fluctuations based just on mean flow. The TK dissipation rates are very strong, very similar in all places. They are very consistent with bottom generated turbulence at all sites. But of course, some stuff are depending on the site and the water depth and width of the channel. So we have tested, like, for example, balances of TK production and dissipation. Those are very site specific. They vary with tide, and maybe at some places, like the dynamics of turbulence are different, but the overall behavior, statistical behavior of it is very similar in all of those places. Okay, so that was like an overview of tidal channels. They are very energetic, very turbulent, and not that easy to work in, but not impossible. So today I'm gonna talk about two projects and that I just completed. Or one I completed, one is still going on. But the first one that I thought it would be interesting for you as ocean engineering student is about measurements from the wake from a full tidal turbine array. This was just published this year. It took us a long time to get all this data processed, especially for me, but it's a very nice project and very nice results, I think. So turbine wakes. So you have a tidal turbine, you put it in the water, and just as you put any obstacle in the water, it will create a wake downstream of it. And those wakes are typically characterized by low velocities because you extracted momentum or diverted momentum from the flow, and also because of eddies that shed from those structures, you get high turbulence. This type of wake, and in the context of marine energy or tidal energy, are very important for turbine array design and for deciding when can you put another turbine, because developers wanted to put a lot of turbines in the water, and see how long does it take for a wake to recover, or when can I put the next turbine, basically. So in order to maximize energy extraction or energy production. Also because the wake creates change in the environment, and it's important to quantify the environmental impacts of that turbine in extracting energy from the flow and changing the conditions. So, for example, here we have a very nice figure of a photo of an offshore wind plant. Here you can visualize the wake because of cloud formation on the wake of the wind turbines. We cannot do that for tidal turbines because they are underwater. And so typically everything was studied using like numerical models or very fancy CFD computations, but or lab experiments under controlled conditions. But actually we were never able to measure the wake in the field because of two reasons. Because there were not that many turbines in the water, but also because it's not that easy to capture a spatial phenomena in the field. And also in a tidal flow, which varies all the time, every 6 hours you have a change in direction, the turbine is there, what conditions are you gonna measure, etc. So I did some prior work on turbine wakes, first on a more steady state environment in a river in Alaska, where we were able to measure the spatial wake of a cross-flow turbine. So this is a drawing of the river, and the flow is from in this direction, and you can see this velocity. The colors are velocity, and then the black line there at 0 is the turbine, and then you can see that downstream of the turbine you have like very much reduced velocities. And we did this experiment in Alaska a long time ago. We use a drifting method where we can map the flow around the turbine, and we repeated that many times and got like an average representation of the wake on that river. And we also found that the wake didn't recover there. For some risks. Then I moved to a more challenging place, tidal channel in the Bay of Fundy, where we just, they had put the turbines for a limited time, and tried just to map the flow downstream of the turbine, but in unsteady state. So we developed a method that we call the turbulent flow mapping, and we just use, and that's what I'm gonna tell you about. The methods part are already published, but we didn't capture the whole wake of the turbines because the turbines were not operational at the time. They were only operational for a few days, so we had to wait until they put all the turbines to actually apply this method and measure the wake. Okay, so the main findings for this project were that we described, I will describe to you the main wake features, the difference that we found between ebb and flood tides, because the flow is not the same in every direction. Does the wake recover, and how far, how long does it take in terms of mean flow, but also in terms of turbulence. And then also I'm gonna talk a little bit about energy dissipation in this wake. So the field measurements occur in Grand Passage. This is a small tidal channel within the Bay of Fundy, so it's not the main tidal channel. The main tidal channel is Minus Passage. This is a more tiny channel, more manageable. It still has like 3 meters per second flows. The big part of the Bay of Fundy has 5 meters per second flow. So this was a more benign environment for the turbines. It's a tidal channel. It's like maybe like 4 kilometers wide. And the turbulent dissipation rates are like kind of 10 to the minus 4, still pretty turbulent. The channel is oriented from south to north. Flood is towards the north. Ebb tide is going south, and then the little circle is where the turbine platform was, and then there's some local coordinate system that I will use through the plots and results, and I'm gonna show. So why a direction is on the direction of the flow, just downstream of the turbine or upstream of the turbine. Okay, so what were the turbines? The platform that I work around was Sustainable Marine Energy 4.63 flat-eye platform. It was the first generation of their platform. It was a floating platform that holded 4 6.3 meter turbines, horizontal axis turbines, separated a little bit. So in each one of those vertical veins underwater, there is a turbine. You can see here when they were installing the turbine blades, so there are 2 underwater and then 2 that are being serviced outside of the water, but then they go down on the water. And the nice thing about this is there's 4 turbines, and then the entire platform used to be aligned with the flow. So then if it was, a flood, it would be on one direction, and then the tidal currents will change, and the entire platform will move with the current. So the turbines will be doing like this every 6 hours, and then you have like a wake on that direction when the turbines are on that direction, and then a wake on the other direction when the entire platform moved. So we had to cover both conditions. So the challenge was unsteady flow, spatial gradients, also a moving platform, so how we do it. At first we thought about just a regular use of vessel-mounted ADCP transect. We wanted to measure velocities, but I also wanted to get some measurements of turbulence. So we did the transect with ADCPs and repeated transect, but I also wanted to try another methodology using drifters equipped with ADCPs. Today I'm going to just talk about the drifters. So we developed these drifters. It's like a very simple version of a drifter. We just put a Nortex signature ADCPs that have capabilities for measuring turbulence. We had used them before, bottom-mounted settings. I had used them before on drifters in Alaska. In my prior lab, we had developed a wave buoy, drifting wave buoy, also with the signatures on. So I just put them together in just a very simple buoy setup. And I used 2 different ADCPs, a 1 megahertz unit, a 500 megahertz unit, just to cover the entire water column. I forgot to say that this is a 14 meter mean depth water column. The tidal range is about 5 meters there. So I needed to cover at least like 20 meters of water. With the 1 megahertz unit, I could do that. With the 500, I have more coverage with that one. We also used 2 different frequencies to avoid any like interference between the ADCPs, and we also only had 2 drifters, and it was all we could manage. So what we did is that we were just on a small vessel, just downstream of the turbines, and then we will just release the drifters and let them go with the current. And we did that many times. So these ADCPs can sample fast. We were sampling velocities at 8 hertz and 4 hertz, depending on the unit. We were sampling on the vertical every 0.5 or 0.6 meters, and we also had an integrated IMU in each instrument, and we also attached to each of the drifters a fast sampling GPS. So we could know location of the instrument, but also an estimation of drifting velocity of each instrument. So then we can correct our Lagrangian measurements and convert them to a Eulerian measurements. So this is an schematic of data collection. It's a little bit complicated, but here we have a time series of the flow from a flow meter mounted on the platform. We have positive velocities are for flood, negative velocities are for ebb tide, and then the green dots are the times where we release the drifter. So a lot of measurements on F, a lot of measurements during one flood, and we are comparing like drifting velocity with mean flow velocity, so it's very similar. We also had measurements of where the turbines were. We had GPSs on the platform, so we can know how aligned with the flow were the turbines, so we could like then especially know where our drifters were with respect to each turbine. So we did a couple hundred drifts in a very organized manner. We will start from one side of the platform and then move and release at different different locations along the array. So we had 4 turbines, so we had to cover all the turbines. We did about like 9 stations, release stations, and we let them drift. And we did that about 130 times for the flood and the same amount of drifts for ebb. And on those plots, those are just the drifter tracks colored by drifting speed. And you can immediately see lower velocities in the middle, like in yellow colors, and those are just downstream of the platform, so within the wake. And the more pink colors are like just outside of the platform where there's no wake, so the flow is going a little bit faster because it's not being interfered by the turbulence. Okay, so I talked to a few people yesterday and they were having problems with motion correction, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that today. Of course, when we had the drifters, sometimes the the free surface was very flat and very calm. We still had some movement of the drifter, but then sometimes during the experiment we had a little bit of wind and some local wind waves, very tiny. We will still manage to do the measurements, but then if we look at the raw data, and this is just vertical velocity recorded by the ADCP in time, so the ADCP is moving, and you can see this banding on the data. So that's an indication of motion contamination, but just not like pitch and roll, just bobbing contamination. So to remove that, it's very useful to have an IMU so you can reconstruct the vertical movement of the buoy. So we work on that and develop a few methods to integrate IMU information to reconstruct the 3D movement of the buoy and then subtract that from the measured velocities and be able to clean the vertical velocity from like the movement of the buoy from the data itself. So our eyes are really good at filtering out the motion contamination, but then we were able to get a very clean version of the velocities, applying different types of motion correction. So we try IMU acceleration, bottom vertical velocities measurement that should be 0, but we were seeing some vertical velocity measurements, and remove that. Also using some depth average vertical velocity. We tried different methods, but then we ended up using the IMU acceleration data integrated to get a vertical velocity and then correct all the raw data from the ADCPs to obtain like clean velocities. So if anyone wants to talk about that, I'll be happy to share what we did. Okay. So let's move to the turbulent flow mapping. So how do I do it? So I have a lot of data, spatially distributed data, time distributed data, and it's like everything is variable in time and in space. So what we did, or what I did, was organize all the data first by mean flow condition. So as you saw earlier, in tidal channels, everything is dependent on mean flow. Like if you don't have freshwater inputs or wind waves, then everything is governed by tides, and basically velocities are also governed by tides, and everything is very repetitive and it can be like a little bit deterministic. So you will expect that something that happened at one stage of the tide will be the same thing happening at the following same stage of the tide. Okay? So then we can organize things by tidal stage. And we organize things by maybe water depth, but also by tidal speed. So we could do that. And we had done that for the turbulence analysis before, and we thought to do the same with this data set. So we organize all the drift by inflow conditions, so by mean flow entering the turbines. We use the current meter data set that I showed before as a reference, so we like break it out on little velocity beams and then put all the data within a velocity beam and assume that it was all the same. So I assume flow stationarity. And then in the space, we just did a grid, horizontal grid, just as in a numerical model. We did a regular 5x5 grid, considering like the sampling rate of the instruments and how fast they were moving. We will get from 8 to 16 measurements within 5 meters. So we thought that would be enough. And then since we repeated things so many times, we will have a lot of data within those squares in the plan view, and we will have a lot of velocity profiles just taken at different times, but similar velocity conditions, similar tidal conditions. So we could produce this grid average parameter. So basically convert this, organize it by tidal flow, and then just get a grid product, a graded product. That's what we did. So, here I have some plots of single drift before averaging. And I was very happy to see this because especially we have F drifts, flood drifts, we have horizontal velocity. This is all post-process, motion removed, everything. And then you can immediately see like mid-water depth or like those yellow areas. And then the profiles kind of have this like bump with less velocity. That's the wake of the turbines. The turbines were sitting like 5 meters below the water surface. So we can see here very clearly like a reduced velocity, or at least I can here, and that's indication of the wake. We can also see some like strong vertical velocity fluctuations here, and I believe those to be like eddies shed from the turbine blades. This is on F tide, so look at the profile, very different. This is on flow, the bathymetry is different. Here's very flat, then it gets shallower, and the other side is like flat, but then it gets deeper. So that also contributes to the recovery or the evolution of the wake of the turbines. So a flood, we could see here like a stronger wake here, then some other stuff here. And then we could also see these patterns in many of the drifts where we had these strong vertical velocities that we associated with eddies shed by the turbines. And now let's go to the maps real quick. Here I'm showing 3 horizontal maps at hub depth. We have these maps for different levels in the water column, and I'm just showing the ones that are correspond with the center of the turbine. We have a long channel velocity, so the turbines are right here. Actually, this is the center point of rotation of the platform, so the turbines are actually like 30 meters downstream of that X, so the turbines are like around there. And then we can see in this average product, so I put all the data from the drifters and created this 5 by 5 meter grid, took averages, and then now I have a really nice map of the flow velocity downstream of the turbine here, the reduced velocities, the high velocities outside, and then we have reduced velocities until like 200 meters downstream approximately from the turbines. That's about 20 effective diameters downstream, or no, yes, maybe like 15. And in the literature, or from DAX experiments, they like a rule of thumb was that turbine wakes recover 10 diameters downstream of the turbine. So if the turbine has 10 meter diameter, then 100 meters downstream of the turbine, the flow will be back to its original, if there is enough momentum to feed into a wake and make it recover. In this case, we saw maybe recovery at 15 to 20, a little bit longer, but we also saw a different behavior on flood children. Regarding turbulence, here I'm just showing vertical velocity variance, so it would be like the vertical component of TKE. Here we see a lot of variance just downstream of the turbine, and then immediately it goes down to more like mild values. So the turbulence recovers much quicker than the mean flow. We have seen that on the river measurements, we have seen that on the lab experiments, and also in the numerical model. So we are pretty sure that turbulent fluctuations just are shed and they are quickly dissipated downstream of the turbine. I also did some estimates of the TK dissipation rate using the second order structure function. I won't go into the details of how to make this calculation. It took a lot of work to just remove a lot of data. We were only using the Signature 1000 data for this calculation. It sampled faster. A lot of assumptions also to be able to use that function. But if you believe me, the levels of turbulence are very consistent with other levels of turbulence measured using bottom-mounted ADCBs and shear probes in the same area. Also, the distribution or the probability distribution of these values is log normal, so very consistent with the theory. So I do believe those maps. We have here some maps on the other direction. So now the wake is on the other side of the plot in the y negative. So this is south of the platform. And you can see here, well, there is a lot of spatial variability also in the flow. We did measurements also with no turbine, so we know what the original flow looked like. And here you can see the wake. So the wake is very constrained here, and it's a little bit longer than the flood wake. But in terms of turbulence, it's very similar. So turbulence recovers very quickly in both directions, but the mean flow velocity doesn't, and it's very different. And mean flow velocity is what you use to estimate power extraction. So you will want like higher velocities to get more power out when using a turbine, because power scales to u to the power of 3. So very important to have stronger muscles. And now if we look, I'm just gonna show some vertical profiles at different distances. You can just, these are for flood, and here you have blue and red are on the outside of the wake. So it's noisy, but maybe underlayer type flow. Some noise near the bottom. These are all like surface down-looking ADCP measurements, so we have some problems at the bottom, but then here you can really see the change in shear and the signature of the wake here, and you can see how this becomes more nice and more smooth, and then it starts to look like the other profiles, and then the wake just expands vertically and the profiles start to recover, and at the end they look exactly like the ones on the outside, because this channel is so wide and it's so energetic that it's able to fix the wake, not as in the river. On the other side, on ebb tide, it's very similar, but then the wake was very constrained to the upper water column, and it actually remained visible very, like much longer downstream, and it took way longer for it to spread out vertically and to recover. Actually, if you look like here at Y30, so this is the same distance from the turbines, and you can see here that the wake is still very much there, and this one has already started to recover. And the reason is because flood tide here is much more turbulent. Ambient turbulence on flood tide is much more stronger during flood than during ebb. Okay. Finally, for this part of the talk, and this is something that I was really interested in, is that so we have a map of TK dissipation rate. So, and I can estimate how much additional energy is being dissipated in the wake of the turbine. So a turbine is extracting energy because it's like facing the flow is moving some blades, the blades are rotating, and then they're producing like some process, mechanical in electricity process. They transform that into electricity. So they remove energy from the flow because the blades are rotating. But also, we are removing energy from the flow because we have an obstacle in the water, and that is creating more turbulence, and turbulence is getting dissipated into heat and sound. So we are removing additional energy from the flow. So in the project in Alaska, we found that dissipation was even the same order of magnitude than what the turbine was producing. So if we were producing 30 kilowatts for electricity, we were removing 60 kilowatts on average from the flow, and 30 were just being dissipated to turbines. So it was not very efficient. It was just like a big rock underwater, just producing electricity, but also making the flow lose more energy because the design was very robust and the water column was very shallow. I'm not saying anything against the turbine. That turbine is awesome. Produces energy for an isolated community in Alaska. Is a great project. But in this case, it was a little different. The turbines are more like I don't know the word in English, but like more smooth. And they don't block as much of the water column. So they block only like a third of the water column, but they are like 3 blades on it, so very thin. In this case, we were able to integrate the TK dissipation rate in a volume, like the volume covered by the wake. And I estimated that the energy dissipated in the wake was about 8 kilowatts for F, so not that much. 30 kilowatts on flood on average for a 2 meter per second flow speed, but the array was rated at 240 kilowatts. So only like less than 10% or maybe like 5% of the energy was being lost in the wake. So I will say that setup was very efficient, and they were just extracting energy for electricity production and not losing energy to turbulence dissipation, which I think is a very nice result. And here you can see some plots of turbulent dissipation, integrated turbulent dissipation within the wake. And also we see that on ebb or flood, so on flood is a little bit more, but also the flow is more turbulent. But they have the same behavior, so they peak at the same distance and then they recover at like almost at the same rate. So turbulence recovers like very similarly for all flow conditions at this site. So the main findings also This is something that we are very interested in, and I'm not an expert on that, but some stuff that I'm trying to learn now with Jenna. And also we have all of these ADCP measurements, and we were also looking at the backscatter from the ADCP. Of course, we remove all the bad correlation data and the low amplitude data. We didn't use that, but we also have a really nice signature of high or elevated backscatter from the ADCP measurements that could be a potential for could be used for potential wake tracing and wake recovery. So this is something that we are interested in. Also, you can see that the platform here creates a lot of air entrainment into the water column. So I thought that was very interesting, but maybe we can use it to learn more about wakes. Side measurement. Okay, so the main findings of this part of the talk is that we were able to measure the wake. We have provided a lot of information for numerical model validation, for turbine placement design. We found that for this particular set of turbines, the wake is constrained to the upper water column. At this site, the wake will recover faster on flood tide, because the wake was very evident farther downstream. We observed a peak on turbulence intensities about 2 effective diameters of the array. Is like a rectangle, so it has 4 turbines, so that's like a rectangle of like 26 meters, and an effective diameter is like half that. So we had a peak on turbulence about like 30 meters downstream of the turbines. And we observed that recovered very quickly. So turbulence recovered about 10 effective diameters downstream, but the mean float recovers much later. And also important that less than 10% of energy is extracted, is being dissipated on the wake. That is also important because in big oceanographic models, sometimes they put like a sink term representing each turbine, and they added, because they cannot resolve the turbine movement. So if you wanted to test like the effect of a big tidal farm, you could add some representation of the sink of momentum created by the turbines rotating, but now you could also add another term related to the wake dissipation. So then you can add like maybe 10% more of energy or tidal energy is being lost because of the wake, which I thought it would be good to include that in more large-scale oceanographic models. Okay. I'm good? Okay, because now I'm gonna change gears. I still have time, right? Do we have some time or?
15 minutes.
Okay, I can just show very quickly
Like
other stuff that I'm working
like 10
on.
if you want questions. But
Okay, yeah, okay. Anyways, when I was on the field, the big problem that we had is that for doing this drifter work, I needed calm conditions, and waves were annoying. Waves created more motion contamination, dangerous conditions, of course, for us being on a small boat. So after I did this, we knew that waves occur on high flow tidal channels. We usually just don't think much about them, but they became a problem. So I got interested on how waves or surface gravity waves behave on these very strong currents. We are usually study waves on the coast, but not in this type of environment. So main motivation for this second part is that wave interfere with my wake measurements. So then I needed to learn more about wave currents and turbulence interactions and see how waves behave here. How can they impact the turbines, but also how will they impact the wake recovery if they are waves like propagating on top of this wake. But for that, I needed to learn more about the basics of wave current interactions. This is a very, I think there is a lot of research going on regarding this. Wave current interactions are not very well resolved. Parameterizations of these processes are being included in large-scale numerical models such as WaveWatch 3 or CROGO or large-scale oceanographic models. And I think there is a lot of room to provide some information on how waves propagate in these tidal channels. So the main thing that happens to waves here is that they refract, so they change direction when they encounter currents. There's also a Doppler shift, so they change their frequency. And when the waves are opposed the current, so we have one wave and then current on the other direction, the waves get larger and steeper. So very much like when they go into shallow water, there's increased wave breaking, and there's also, because of that, there is increased turbulence at the surface. So actually there's a Google Earth image here of Grand Passage where you can see, I have to point this way. You can see here waves propagating into the channel, and then you can see waves breaking there, right here. This is on flood tide, so flood is going this way and waves are probably coming the other way. So talking about this, turns out there was an old set of measurements from 2016 where they put a signature 500 and they actually measure waves in this channel at the same location where the turbines were right here. So I got that data set and I started working on it. And I've been working on it for a few years because I started a new faculty position and then everything got really busy. And I am trying to finish this up. But it's very interesting. So it's the same side, just a bottom-mounted ADCP with capabilities of measuring turbulence, currents, and surface tracking. So it can measure waves, currents, and turbulence synchronously. I'm not going to get into the details, but the measurements are about 2 months long. Here I'm only showing like 15 days of data. Mean flow, very tidal channel flow, so bidirectional currents. Then we have some estimate of vertical velocity variance. And you can see sometimes during the deployment where you see those yellow colors of elevated variance. So that means that something was in the water or happening at the surface during those days. And then also the backscatter from the ADCP also show like strong returns near the surface and even like going all the way through the water column during some times. So using I'm just gonna skip this for time, but using the surface tracking mode of the ADCP, I was able to estimate significant wave height. And I colored that red when there was F tide, and on flood, and blue when there was flood tide, so different directions. And you can see some small oscillations of the water surface, like very tiny, maybe like 10 centimeters, but then there are some periods where you see this increase on significant wave height. And you can see like this behavior where in one, for example, in the last part of the plot, you can see in red that you have these really, really strong free surface variations, and then on the other stage of the tide, you get nothing, or very much smaller. We confirmed these are waves. We estimated a spectrum from the free surface. So we have a peak on the wave surface gravity wave band. So these are like 7 to 8 second waves. Here in this period, waves were coming from the north, so they were opposing the tides during flood, and then the opposite happened here. So we have waves from the south. We still have waves on both tides, but the biggest ones are during ebb tide when they are opposing the currents. So this is something that we knew before. We had an idea, and this has been reported in the literature many times, that when waves oppose the currents, they are bigger. And we just corroborated that here. And I've been trying to like just characterize the wave field. These are very small waves. They are like maybe 0.5 meter waves, but they create a lot of changes in the free surface, of course, but also we have some like, here I have some like just characterization of velocity and wave height. And for example, for this event, we had high winds that were producing waves, and then you have like big waves when they are opposing the currents, but then no waves when they are following the currents, but the wind was still high. So basically the currents just suppress the wave growth in when they are opposing, they are following the currents, or they are in the same direction. I'll go real quick. So this is the other example, that the event that occurred at the end, and then here is very clear that when you have opposing waves and currents, the significant wave height kind of has this almost sinusoidal behavior that matches the current, and then it gets a peak, and then they get smaller, and then they get suppressed, and then they get big again and suppressed, but the wind here was steady. So the waves were just not growing, or growing very slowly, very tiny, when the waves follow the currents. And I thought that was really interesting. And also here we have an evolution of the peak wave period, and you can see that the waves are still getting, so there's still a lot of energy transfer. So the peak period is increasing during the event, but then the wave height just changes depending on the tide. And also here we see very longer waves when the currents follow the waves, and then shorter waves and steeper waves when they are opposing the currents. So I'm just gonna skip that because I wanna get to the end of it, but had a lot of things here. But anyways, this is something that I'm still working on, and regarding just the simple part of it, which is not that simple, but it's more like the intuitive part of it, I have tested that wave growth is modulated and limited by the tidal currents. The tidal currents are affected by waves, but only we can measure the orbital velocities, but if we average on time, actually the currents are so strong that the changes in mean velocity are very small. So if you are interested in mean velocity when there are waves, doesn't change that much, but if you're interested in instantaneous velocities, of course the velocities change a lot through the water column. I'm also starting to get into this vertical injection and transport of bubbles from breaking waves that we saw during flood. That is something that I'm just starting to look at, and I hope to get something out of that, maybe collaborate with Jere on that. And so we're very excited, and I'm also working on getting the turbulence data out of when there are waves and currents, because it's so turbulent that the waves also contribute a lot to the turbulence, and it's very hard to remove the wave signal from the turbulence measurements. Anyways, I just also wanted to take a few minutes to show you other stuff that we're working on Chile. This is work that I did in Canada, but I also have been living back in Chile for like 4 years now. I work at Universidad de Concepción. We are a very big university. We're the third largest university in the country. We have more than 30,000 undergrad students. I work at a civil engineering department, but I'm also part of a oceanographic research center called COPAS Coastal, which is a very similar setting to what the centers that you have here. So I'm still working on the wave-current interactions. I also want to take that research to Chacao Channel. I don't have measurements there yet. I was just able to get a new ADCP, but we're tackling like that numerically. So we're implementing like CROCO models or large oceanographic models, and then coupling with WaveWatch 3, and that's going to be like my next stage of my own research. But I have also done some work on the Strait of Magellan. We have a very tight coastal engineering community in the country, so we all kind of work together and share some research. And the Strait of Magellan is in southern Patagonia. It's a connection between the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. It has been studied, but not that much. So recently, we just finished up a paper on tides and turbulence of the Strait of Magellan, and we are continuing to do some numerical model work there. Also to motivate any of you who wants to visit Chile, we are also doing some work on infragravity wave propagation in estuaries and transport. We are very fond of this small bay. This is a drone video of this little estuary. It's very small, but we were very surprised. There was a high swell event. The coast of Chile is very energetic, so we have amazing wave energy resources. Here the waves were maybe 5 meter tall, and then we had this small estuary, and we are trying to understand how waves propagate upstream, and maybe to understand how if they transport sediment or not. It's a very special place for us. We are very excited. We have done 2 field experiments here trying to understand wave propagation upstream, but also salt propagation and fluid stuff. So I am also part of a civil engineering department in Chile. And I did a lot of work before getting my PhD, on floods. So I'm trying also to move to more local problems. We have a lot of winter flooding, a lot of high swells flooding, of course tsunamis. Chile is a very seismic country, so I think we do great with tsunamis. We have done a lot of work in, people, not me, but the group has done a lot of work in tsunamis for the past 15 years maybe, and now we're also studying like coastal flooding, so the mix of like when you have high rain events or these atmospheric rivers that are happening like every year over there. This is very close to where my university is, so we are doing like some flood modeling and trying to understand how tides interact now with the river mouth and maybe with the waves. So I'm maybe moving from high flow tidal channels to more like smaller sites, small scale sites, but people live around here and they get flooded a lot. So it's low income communities, and very interested on working on that. And then finally, my work with my research center, and also what I want to do, or another effort that I'm part of, is coastal ocean monitoring and forecasting. So the coast of Chile is very long, but we have a lot of tidal gauges along the coast, but we don't have many wave buoys or other oceanographic buoys. So there are a couple of buoys, mostly managed by universities, where we have like measurements of like CTD measurements or temperature or just weather measurements. But wave measurements are very scarce. So we only have like 5 wave buoys, like with publicly available data. They are offshore. So now we are working really hard on this Bio region to get more data, just so we can understand how the system works, and also so we can develop more local forecasting tools, because all the global forecasting models are very good, but they are much better where there is more data, and the northern hemisphere has way more data. So forecasting here is much better than forecasting in the south. So we are trying to develop local forecasting models, high resolution models. So this is just an example of a wave model that I'm working on. And we also have our own oceanographic buoy now. We put it like inside here. There's a port here, so we have this little project where we are supposed to measure wind, currents, and waves. So we developed that large buoy. We developed all the with the team all the like connections and transmission, and it has to be transmitting all the time, 24/7. Where we put a weather station, we have a downlooking ADCP, and we also added like a small wave buoy next to it. So we're very happy with this setting. It's the first time in the region or in the country that we have done that. And we have put it since, it's been there since last year on the Bio region, but now we are replicating and we are moving up north. This is very coastal, so this is like 20-meter depth. We're very excited about this development, and there are a lot of opportunities for us to collaborate in this area, more applied than more pure science. Okay, so with that, I would like to finish. I took all the time, I'm sorry, but thank you so much for listening. I hope this was interesting for you. I wanted to thank, of course, Jenna for suggesting me as a speaker today, to Adriano and Hannah for organizing, and of course to the CCOM Center, because they also contributed to my trip here. Of course to all my colleagues back in Chile, and my funding from the Chilean NSF and my other previous labs. So thank you.
So we don't have a lot of time, but we can do maybe 1 or 2 questions, and you guys are more than welcome to talk to her after. Just as in the class, well, this competition. I think Colin first.
Thank you for the talk, Maricarmen. You had mentioned in the first presentation that 2 of the motivations, one was determining basically when you can put another turbine in the wake of one turbine. The second consideration or motivation was the environmental impact.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the environmental impact of these tidal?
Yeah, of course.
generators?
That is a good question. I always get that question. So I've been interested more in the hydrodynamic impact of it. So how does mixing change, or how does turbulence change, and what are the implications for that? But there's a lot of work, and I think most of the work focuses on environmental impacts of like biology and mammals, marine mammals, and encounters. So there is a lot of research about that, and I think it's also what has stopped a little bit the development of tidal energy, because there's so much to consider, and everybody's very worried about like encounters or collisions with turbines. So there's a lot of research being done in the States or in Canada or in Europe about that. I think it's one of the most important things to consider. Like, we have clean energy, we know that it's predictable, the turbines can get in the water. It's not that easy to develop a turbine. I know that here there is a group that developed turbines and test turbines. It's not that easy to have moving parts on the water, but I think equally important has been the research conducted for environmental impact. So I have not done that, but for example, in that platform, they had echo sounders and cameras like recording all the time. The amount of data that they have I think is unmanageable. But I think a lot of technologies are being developed to detect fish encounters or mammal encounters. They have controls that they can stop the turbines if they see something nearby, that kind of stuff.
Can I ask a follow-up real quick? I know.
Is it very quick?
Yes, is the bathymetry, I know this is a function of, I'm sure the depth that the turbine is in,
Yeah.
but would the bathymetry change around the turbine?
It depends on the material. So there have been a lot of lab experiments putting turbines on like sand beds, and of course you get a scour around the turbine pile, but also some scour downstream because of the eddies that are shed by the turbine blades and from the pile. But in this type of environments, there is no, the sediment is very coarse, so the flow is so fast that all the things that are more erodible, is that the right word, is gone already. So it's mostly gravel or even rock.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a couple questions, but I'm trying to stick on one. I was curious what kind of work for the project you mentioned with tracking bubbles and waves. I was wondering what kind of measurements you're wanting to make and what kind of work you want to do for that
So
project.
basically, the instrument of choice to me is the 5-beam ADCP. I have done a lot of work on the Nortex signatures. So they just got a echo sounder mode on their ADCPs, and I have just the typical backscatter data from ADCPs. I want to see if that is useful. I am still learning how to post-process that to get something meaningful. But I also done recently some new measurements using the echo sounder mode. So I'm trying to use that. And back where I am, I have more limited resources. Honestly, not that many people do acoustic stuff. So there's a lot of people who do passive acoustics. There is a bit like whale people over there, but not that many people who do like actual active acoustics. So I'm trying to use what we have to learn more about that.
Thank you.